Last week, Hello Games released No Man's Sky's biggest update to date since it launched 2 years ago now, and it is called No Man's Sky Next, and it has added a large amount of features to the game. Being someone who purchased No Man's Sky at launch and did enjoy my very short amount of time in it, however, I was happy that with this update I finally had an excuse to check it out once again and give it another go with fresh eyes. And I've been playing it a fair bit over the past week, and I have been enjoying myself with the title. Now obviously I think we all know at this point that No Man's Sky at launch was a complete PR disaster. It was clear that the final product did not at all represent what both Sony and the game's developers originally claimed the game would be or what it would be like. Some people are still holding a grudge when it comes to this whole game and Hello Games and what they did. However, I was absolutely willing to move on and see exactly what they've done with their product with No Man's Sky. And I have to say, overall, I have been enjoying myself and the time I've put into the game so far. For me, the promise of No Man's Sky was so appealing. A near infinite universe to explore was super appealing and super awesome. The main thing the player does in No Man's Sky is basically explore. You're continuously traveling to new planets and new star systems. The exploration in this game is incredibly repetitive. It always has been, and the next update doesn't do a lot to actually fix that. This game always has been and continues to be not for everyone. I want to stress that No Man's Sky is not for everyone. There is definitely a certain type of gamer that is really going to enjoy the repetitive nature of the exploration in No Man's Sky. And while I don't think I could play this for hundreds of hours or anything like that like some gamers have, I do find, at least to some extent, the repetitive nature of the gameplay and of the exploration fun. I do find it enjoyable. The tasks you are performing on the planets themselves and while exploring the star systems are incredibly repetitive. You warp into a new system, you go to the space station, you sell some stuff maybe, you head down to some of the planets, you look around, you do some mining, maybe complete a few quests and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, the whole thing is very, very repetitive. You are essentially doing the same thing over and over again, and it just comes down to whether that core gameplay loop works for you and whether you enjoy doing it. And in my case, I have been sucked into that core gameplay loop because I just find the setting of the game so appealing. The game really is gorgeous. It's got a wonderful art style, and it feels like for the most part, unless you're stuck on a really stormy, terrible, toxic planet, that wherever you look there's always pretty visuals to see and always a really cool view. Even though the game's not super technically impressive, the visuals are actually something that keep me coming back to it because they are so appealing. Speaking of the game on a technical standpoint, I've been playing it on the regular PS4, not the PS4 Pro, and I have to say that No Man's Sky does not run well at all really. It is definitely playable, however, there are a lot of frame rate drops, a lot of performance issues, especially in my time in the multiplayer side of things. And there were even some audio bugs I was hearing as well, which is a shame because while it doesn't necessarily stop me or discourage me from playing the game itself, it does definitely take me out of the game and out of the experience in that moment when those things do occasionally occur. I would often notice when approaching planets or entering the atmosphere of certain planets that the game would start to noticeably slow down. Going back to the core gameplay loop of No Man's Sky, pretty much all you're doing other than exploring is going to be all based around resource management, about mining resources, about dealing with your inventory, about selling resources, about choosing what to keep and what to drop because you need certain things to charge perhaps your pulse engine or your launch thrusters and things like that. In that sense, the game is actually very similar to Minecraft. You are mining resources, gathering resources, and managing them effectively so your inventory isn't running out of space constantly. This is the part of the game that I really hate and I'm not enjoying at all, and I never really enjoyed it from the beginning. And Next didn't really improve it that much for me. The inventory and UI overall is incredibly clunky to use. It isn't very well designed and isn't entirely clear on what exactly certain things are and what things are valuable and what things aren't. Gradually you develop an understanding of what things are used for what and what items you should keep and what items you should sell, but that's mainly only from experience, from actually playing the game and even perhaps looking up some guides online. Running around planets, looking for resources, mining resources, just so you have the ability to take off isn't fun, it's a pain in the ass. If you enjoy other survival games like Minecraft where this kind of resource management is prevalent, then you may enjoy this part of the game, but for me personally, I did not find the act of seeking out resources, constantly just running around areas of planets, shooting crap, shooting trees, shooting rocks. It just wasn't fun. And it was particularly frustrating having to constantly fuel up my launch thrusters so I could take off in my ship. While the resources to do that aren't necessarily very rare, it's still frustrating that some of the time you get into your ship, you'll notice, oh, I need to fill up my launch thrusters with some resources. You need to hop back out, run around for a second. It's just annoying, and it's a design choice I'm not a huge fan of personally. I feel like it could have been streamlined and just made a lot more convenient for the player. Which is what I'm talking about when I say that this game just isn't for everyone. If what I'm describing sounds like a pain in the ass for you, then No Man's Sky probably isn't for you. But I just find my enjoyment in the game in other specific areas. For example, like I mentioned earlier, the exploration, the traversal. I find that fun, I find it enjoyable, and I find it relaxing, and that side of things, that side of the gameplay is what keeps me coming back to No Man's Sky. So even though you may hate some portions of the game, it'll be other portions of the gameplay that'll keep you coming back. When No Man's Sky originally came out, it pretty much had no story whatsoever and very little context as to what was actually happening, with a very disappointing conclusion for those players that chose to go that way with No Man's Sky. But since then, Hello Games has added in updates actual quest structure and a narrative to No Man's Sky. It is still relatively light. It's nothing mind-blowing, there's no cutscenes, there's no voice acting, it's still very light in comparison to most other games. However, it is a hell of a lot more than there used to be. So for those players who prefer a bit more structure, that is absolutely there for you. And with the story, they also added a mission board feature, which allows you to essentially choose from certain side quests that you can accept from NPCs. And just like with the story, these side quests are incredibly light. The activities that they ask you to perform aren't incredibly interesting. They're things like kill a certain number of animals or scan a certain number of plants. The tasks aren't very interesting, but again, I do appreciate that they've added a bit more structure to the overall exploration experience. In Next, they've also added a bit more detail and depth to the crafting system in No Man's Sky, which, much like the whole refining process and the UI as a whole, I just can't stand it. They've added a feature that is similar to Minecraft, where there are furnaces where you essentially put one resource into what's called a refinery. You have to wait around and then it'll turn into another resource. All I wanted to be doing was exploring the galaxy, flying around, looking at new planets, completing new quests. I was constantly held back by, oh great, I've got to get this amount of resources to do this or to charge this, so I've got to wait around with this refinery thing. It was pretty annoying. And as I mentioned earlier with my issues with the UI and how clunky it is, that only made that whole process worse. I don't really understand the trend these days in gaming, where a lot of console games have decided to use an in-game cursor in menus where you basically move your control stick and it acts as a mouse on console. I do not understand this trend. I've been seeing it in a few other games these days as well, like Destiny. PC gamers should be using cursors. We should be able to easily flick between menus and select options in a much more intuitive way. So the fact that No Man's Sky's UI is making me drag around a cursor on consoles using my joystick is incredibly frustrating and only adds to why I just don't like the UI in this game at all. It might sound a bit nitpicky, which it is, but it derails my experience personally. It's just a weird design choice I don't understand. Now obviously the huge main big thing in the next update is the multiplayer side of No Man's Sky that was promised from Sony and Hello Games since when the game was first announced, but it was never in the game at launch. And now, finally in the next update, they've added full multiplayer. You can fully explore the galaxy at any point with 3 other friends. That's how I played the bulk of the next update, and it was certainly enjoyable. While I did find that you're not actually interacting with the other player in your party that frequently, since you often need to go your separate ways to find certain resources so you can charge certain things. Just having other players around you and having your friends around you and seeing their starships flying next to you, it definitely adds, at least in my opinion, a lot more longevity to No Man's Sky. For me, I'm going to feel a lot more inclined to have a short go of No Man's Sky and just pop in whenever, now that I know I can do so with a friend. Taking a minute to talk about the game's sound design, it's just not that amazing. It's not bad, but it just doesn't stand on its own and it's not very unique. The sound of ships flying or the sound of your mining beam, they just don't sound very cool. So while the sound design is certainly serviceable enough, I want to take a minute to also talk about the game's music, which is absolutely phenomenal. Some of the early moments when you take off for the first time, or whenever you get in-game achievements, the music is just fantastic stuff. Even if you're not interested in the game, I definitely recommend going to check out some of the music, search it up on YouTube or something, it's really good. Going back to the performance of the game, as I mentioned, it doesn't run very well on regular PS4, but there's also been a lot of reports of crashes on the PlayStation 4 version, and I myself did experience this, and my game did crash once. And even though it was only once, and I jumped right back in, and I didn't really lose any progress, it is still something that derails my immersion in the game, and it is still frustrating. Overall, I think No Man's Sky, even even with this next update, it still isn't my dream space exploration game like I originally thought it would be. No Man's Sky is not for everyone. There are going to be a lot of people that this will just never gel with. The repetitive exploration, the resource management, the clunky UI, it's just going to piss a lot of people off, frankly. But the game definitely has a dedicated player base, and it's definitely going to appeal to other people and certain types of gamers as well. I think if you see gameplay for No Man's Sky and you look at it and you think, this looks interesting to me, or you believe that you may actually enjoy your time with it, I think that on sale, this game is definitely worth at least giving a shot and jumping into. At full price, no, it never was worth it. It definitely still isn't worth it, unfortunately, but if you see the game on sale for half price and you think you'd be interested in at least giving it a go, I'd absolutely recommend you do so. Even though it's not for everyone, even though it's still not my dream space exploration game, it is a hell of a lot closer to what was originally promised from the beginning. This has been SirCazz, farewell.